So here we are, SV650. Now for 2022 I don't think anything's changed, to be perfectly honest with you, so this is really a 2021 model. But there's nothing much wrong with that. It's been around in one way or another for a long time now, so probably not much new they can throw at it now in this stage of the game without a thorough redesign. Right, let's split some traffic, shall we? Well, I beat the lights, that's the question. Made it, lovely. That's right, it won the traffic light Grand Prix there, no trouble at all. Right then, first impressions of this machine. Well, the very first impression was, that's quite a firm seat. And it is still quite firm after 20 minutes riding or so. It'll take longer than that to decide whether it's going to be uncomfortable or not, but yeah, a bit on the firm side. Second thing is good throttle response. This pulls well. And the third one is very good front brakes. I don't mean very good in terms of you know, it's going to beat a Panigale to a stop, but well, they 290mm twin discs with 4 piston calipers. If anything, this bike's overbraked, but yeah, it stops in a hurry, as I'll demonstrate now if it comes through on the old GoPro. Yeah, got the ABS kicking off a little bit there. I kind of let go and kind of reapplied again anyway, so that wasn't the fastest it could stop, but it stops pretty quick. Now I rode 2 Frasers of Gloucester today on my Honda Bros, my own little 650 V-twin. And yeah, I just wanted to have a quick comparison of how they feel. Well, there's not really any comparison. It's not surprising, but my bike does feel like it's from another era, because it literally is. My bike's really quite grunty at the low revs, or low mid-range, but still it's on the slow side, slowish for the revs to pick up, and this does feel quite a bit freer in the engine to rev. Now, one thing that surprised me in the old spec sheets was the weight on this bike. I think it's either 198 kilos or 200 kilos, which for a 650 V-twin I think is a tad heavy. However, the handling feels very light, as a matter of fact, so it's very well disguised. So yeah, unless you are, you know, rather small and not blessed in the old muscle department, then I don't think this is going to be a handful at all, this bike. As a new rider, perhaps one thing that is a little bit maybe off-putting, it has a little tendency to snatch when you apply the throttle from low revs. It can be a bit jerky sometimes, which I'm sure is a byproduct, unfortunately, of all the emissions engineering that has to go into these bikes nowadays. I felt worse, and those bikes that felt worse, strangely enough, were Suzuki's. So here I am, just second gear, 18, 19 miles an hour, just following this vintage Vectra, no offence, well, slightly offensive. And yeah, it's just coming on and off the throttle. It just leaps slightly as you apply the throttle. You do have to be a bit careful just rolling it on, especially as a new rider. If your throttle twist is a bit bigger than you anticipated or expected or planned, it might just catch you by surprise. But one thing it will do is teach you good throttle control. So there is that. Now this bike has oh, I can't remember the name of it, low RPM assist, I think that's the name of it. So as you let the clutch out, it tries to apply a few extra revs to try and ensure that you don't stall. It's not foolproof, but it's a welcome addition. The other thing it's got is the easy start system for the starter button. With that, basically, you don't have to keep your thumb on the button until the engine actually starts. You just press once, let go, and the bike takes care of the rest. So easy to forget about a little thing like that. You end up holding the button in for longer than you really need to. No! Couldn't quite find the horn quick enough there. Nothing wrong with the bike on that score. Just wasn't familiar with the horn position. Horn's not too bad for a single tone, typical Japanese kind of bike horn. Not brilliant, but I've heard weaker. I'll bring my camera down a bit, hopefully look at the clocks. Similar to the last generation GSXS models, I think. But this bike has fewer toys, there's no rider modes to play with. So kind of what you see is what you get in terms of the instruments. There is some options you can scroll through, but as far as I can see, you've got to press buttons on the clock, select and adjust at the top there. There's nothing on the handlebars to let you adjust anything on the instruments. But the clocks are pleasant enough. I know they're LCD and they're not very fancy, but the bike isn't very fancy. So I've got no complaints really about the look of the dash. It's nice to have a gear indicator on there as well. I can get both feet absolutely flat on the ground, no trouble there, with my 32-inch inside leg. Even at a 30-inch inside leg, I imagine you probably end up getting the balls of your feet down without too much difficulty. So, probably everybody knows the specs of this bike anyway, but I still will throw them at you. So it's 645cc, producing 73 PS, or 73 horsepower pretty much. I think that's at 8,500 RPM. The peak torque, which is 47 foot-pounds or 64 Newton meters, is at 6,800 RPM. So getting on for 7,000. So it's not a supremely torquey motorbike, but it pulls well. It does pull efficiently. I've got no complaints so far about what happens when you open the throttle, so that's all good news. The claimed fuel consumption for this little beastie is over 65 miles per gallon. It's actually nearly 69 miles per gallon claimed. I'd be a little surprised if it gets that high, but still 60 plus miles per gallon for a 650, especially in the current situation, isn't bad at all. The style of it does remind me somewhat of the older GSF 400 Bandit from back in the day. Well, I'm old, I remember that far back. That was a good looking machine for sure. This does look quite light, slim, and modern, even though, you know, it's well over 20 years old, this SV650 overall, since its inception. Now, one thing that just surprised me just looking around the bike is the tyres. So 160/60 ZR17 on the back, 120/70 ZR17 on the front, but not cheap and cheerful tyres at all. Dunlop Road Smart 3s on this machine. As long as the chassis is pretty decent, then the tyres aren't going to let the job down at all. The rear shock, I do believe, nestled in there somewhere, is adjustable for preload only. The front forks are unadjustable. Bit of a shame. The brakes 290mm. Look at those bad boys. 290mm twin disc with 4-pot calipers on there. Rear brake I don't think I've tried yet, but that's a 240mm. Is that a single piston caliper? Does kind of look like it from here. On this side there's a little bit less chassis on show. You see some tubing there on the frame just above that front cylinder. Bit of a shame, but you can't hide everything, I suppose. Let's get the lights on, see what we've got. There we go. Hopefully we're in focus. Bit hard to tell. Sometimes it's a trigger on the front of the switch gear that you have to play with, but on this one it's a rocker on the top in the old-fashioned style. The rear lights are LED here. Don't they look good actually, now that I've zoomed in? Looks better on film than it I think does in real life. In real life you can't quite tell it's kind of a circular arrangement. Not easily anyway, but yeah, pretty sexy looking thing that. Nice. So just one little closer look at the clocks. Nothing much to see really. We can cycle through some of the options there on the left hand side. Press adjust and we're playing with the options on the right hand side. Yeah, water temperature, fuel at the bottom, time on the left, rev counter at the top, revving to about 10 before the red line, or well, the black line starts. 14.5 litre tank, which is not the biggest, but with that sort of fuel economy, probably not going to be a big problem for you. Anyway, I'm going to get back on the bike and ride because it's getting a bit later and it's getting a bit greyer. So I might not stay this lucky for long. Let's go. Nice, just put that easy start system to the test. Very quick press of the button and it took care of business. Okay, let's continue our little spin. Now this road is rubbish, frankly, and I'm being bounced around a bit. The suspension is a little on the firm side as well as the seat. It feels composed, it's not kind of get itself out of control or anything, but yeah, there's not a lot of give in the suspension. Gives me the impression this bike was designed to be, yes, an all-rounder, but still with a bit of a sporty bent to it. My back is certainly just about bolt upright. Handlebars are certainly not far away. There's a good bend in the bars. They're quite big bars. If anything, the handlebars, for me anyway, could do with being a bit wider. I feel my hand kind of resting on the handlebar weights rather than kind of fully on the grips. But if you're narrow at the top, not that I'm wide, but if you were narrow at the top, then the handlebars probably suit you just fine. I said the front brakes are very impressive. What's the back brake like? Oh, actually, yeah, pretty good. Not outstanding, but that slowed you down effectively. Getting back to the controls a little bit, just worth mentioning the throttle is not fly-by-wire, at least not at the top end it isn't. Got two cables, push-pull arrangement going on. The clutch is cable. It's not the lightest of clutches, but it's not heavy either. I guess for beginners and those who need to train their hands to get used to clutch and throttle control, a long day might leave their hands or their fingers aching a little bit, but you'll get used to it. It's not a heavy clutch, just I think it could stand being a bit lighter, but not really a problem. It's more of a nitpick. There's not really much to complain about with this bike, to be honest with you. Meat and potatoes motorcycling, but it is actually quite fun to ride. The engine is willing. So far, the chassis has been well behaved. No surprises. No wheeze and wobbles. Sounds pretty decent. And it would sound more decent with a louder exhaust if you were so inclined. Yeah, don't want to use too many revs, but actually it keeps on pulling past about 7,000 and 8,000 RPM. Yeah, this bike is certainly not slow if you're willing to get a bit medieval with the throttle. Now we're at a higher speed on another really quite rubbish road. Yeah, suspension, that firmness at slower speeds translates to a decent road holding now. Certainly not wallowy in any way. So it feels quite grown up now. We haven't got many miles on the clock, so I don't want to lug the engine, but I just want to see how it pulls from fourth gear, which is about 60 in top gear. Oh, hello. That was very keen to accelerate actually from 4,000 RPM in top. Now this bike is, you know, a million miles away from the RS660 and the two owners 660, but if you can't afford those, and they are not cheap bikes, then this seems to have an engine that likes revs, likes to be revved. The handling seems solid so far, but if you are young and you know, those Aprilias are out of reach, this is not slow. And it's not a bad handler. Don't write it off about at least, well, if you can get a test ride. If you are young, I guess test rides can be difficult, but if you're a bit of a, you know, wannabe headbanger on a budget, this is not a bad choice. And if you just want something endlessly reliable, which these machines are, cheap to run, which these machines are, easy to ride, which these machines are, then another reason to seriously consider one of these, I think. Yeah, this bike gets past dawdling traffic or slower traffic just as easy as a bigger bike, as a bigger engine bike. It doesn't feel breathless at all. Better than I was giving it credit for at the start. Medium speed bend coming up. That feels absolutely solid. That is willing to rev. Yeah, it does rev nicely up there. And again, sorry to bore you about the brakes, but you slow down at the other end just as quickly as well. I start to like this bike even more. You know, it's not the last word in sports bike handling at all, but it goes around the bends perfectly well. As a newer rider, I think this is certainly a bike you can grow with. As your own riding talents improve over time, I don't think this bike will run out of talent straight away. Oh yeah, vibration. Not a lot. It's a 90-degree V-twin, so it should be relatively smooth. You can feel the engine working away, especially when you start to accelerate. But actually vibration, kind of things that make your feet and your hands go to sleep, no trouble so far. Oh, I'll tell you what, another thing. It is a bit noisy in my crash helmet, but there isn't actually much in the way of wind blast or buffeting or turbulence hitting me as a rider. The force of the wind is quite strong and constant, but nothing's really being churned up. So as a naked bike, you don't really get much better than that. One thing that isn't working out for me, unfortunately, I've got to admit, is that seat. It does feel a bit like I'm sitting on a plank of wood. My glutes are not happy. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of an ache going on my bot. So while we're talking about kind of the downsides and nitpicks, seat's number one. It's slightly snatchy in low speeds, low throttle openings, often on the throttle. Not tragically so, but yeah, it can catch you out, especially as a newer rider. I think it'll just give you a bit of a buckaroo sometimes. I would have preferred LED lights up front, and the suspension on the firm side and not very adjustable. But on the positives, I like the engine a lot more than I expected. It's got decent low and mid-range pull, and it likes to rev, so that's a good combination. The chassis seems trustworthy. It's solid, doesn't seem to kick about or surprise you at all. Even on the kind of bumpier roads, it kind of hangs together nicely. Doesn't vibrate too much. It just feels like a nice bike to ride. An easy bike to ride, but can also go fast if you want it to. Looks great as well, this machine. So yeah, would I take this bike out on a second date? Damn right I would, definitely. It's a nice fun bike. Somewhat like the GS S650 that I rode a couple of years ago now. This bike surprised me, and it's modern. It doesn't feel like it was kind of developed last century originally. Don't write it off just because it's been around for a long time. We're stuck in rubbish traffic, so I might as well sign off now. I think we're not far from Fraser's ultimately. So thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you folks down in the comments, and hopefully in another video. Take care. Ta-ra.